Jeremy Corbyn next. He has suggested that the state should take control of 8,000 empty properties and give them to the homeless. This in an interview on the Andrew Marr show yesterday. The Labour leader said he would identify deliberately vacant properties and hand them over. I know what you're thinking. Please don't start bashing Corbyn again. But this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So why do you think Jeremy Corbyn's idea is bonkers, James? Well, because if he announces... Maybe I'm doing him a disservice again, but if he announces that the means by which he is going to identify the properties that have been left deliberately vacant by investors, then I'll move some tenants in. Dun, dun, dun. OK. Wriggle your way out of that one, Corbyn fans. 0345 6060 973. That's only one line of inquiry, because I'd like to do the principle and then we can wiggle over the practice. In principle, I'm afraid I don't like this. I'm poised. I've been thinking about Jeremy Corbyn in very positive terms lately. Not really because of substantive policy pronouncements, but more because of the integrity that you could construe as coming from 30 years in the political wilderness, but sticking to your guns because you believe that you're right. It doesn't mean he's right, but it means that his belief and his principles are pretty powerful in a political landscape where integrity and principles seem to be at a premium. Jeremy Corbyn quite possibly is wrong about everything, but the stickability, the commitment to his cause is, for my money, an admirable trait in modern British politics. And I would like to see some way of preventing the properties that our future generations, our younger generations, are being denied the right to live in, somehow being brought back into the bloodstream of the nation. But this doesn't work, does it? I mean, look, he's immediately going to buy 8,000 houses across the country to give immediate housing to those people that are currently homeless. I just think this is my worst nightmare. Just as I feel my feelings towards Jeremy Corbyn beginning to warm up a little bit, he comes out with something that is the very definition of pie-in-the-sky politics. Right, number one, if it's deliberately empty, and those are the grounds for taking it away from me under some form of compulsory purchase, I will just move people into it. I'll move my butler in. I'll move my maids in. I'll give them, they can live around the corner in their own flat instead of living in my basement. If that's literally going to protect me from compulsory purchase, it just seems to be something that's going to have them cheering in the aisles, but not thinking. 0345 6060 973 if you think I've got this wrong. And then there's a really complicated conundrum that I hesitate to put before you because I think it'll make me sound like a bit of a banker. And it's about homelessness. I just think suggesting that you hand over properties, you hand over the keys willy-nilly to people who are currently homeless speaks of an idealism that is beyond my ken. That the plight of homeless people in this country at the moment is shocking. And I know it sounds a little bit trite and a little bit facile, but it's so bloody cold. And when you step over people in doorways and you feel the cold and you know that... I just can't compute it, to be honest with you. It breaks my heart. Yeah, all right, I'm going to say it and you can hate me for it, all right? If I now walked out into the West End of London where I'm sitting and just gave keys to homeless people, I just don't think it would end well. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry if that makes me sound callous, and I'm open to correction. But it seems to me that Jeremy Corbyn is indulging in an almost Trumpian tactic of telling people stuff they're going to want to hear. Obviously, the people that want to hear that we're looking after homeless people and being generally decent are not the same kind of people that Donald Trump appeals to. Donald Trump's fans want to hear we're going to start being mean to Mexicans and really clamping down on black people. But Jeremy Corbyn's fans also want to just hear stuff, it seems to me. Is there any substance to this policy at all? I'd like you to give me a bit of a kicking, actually, for what I just said about the homeless, but I mean it. I'm really sorry. Some of the people sleeping rough are temporarily distressed, but some of them are profoundly vulnerable. They've ended up on the streets because of a lack of care, not because of a lack of housing, believe it or not. To give them the keys to a compulsory purchase property, potentially a property, if I've read this policy correctly, in some of the smartest and swankiest parts of the country. Oh, I don't know. It just seems daft. Phil's in Gibraltar. Phil, what's going on?
Hey, James, how you doing?
All good, mate. What's on your mind? How's Gibraltar today?
It's actually really windy and a couple of construction sites have fallen down. But anyway, I digress.
Really?
So basically, yeah, it happens sometimes. But a couple of points of order, really, just to make sure we're on the same page.
Of course.
Property, much safer investment than anything else, very low risk. It's obviously going up higher than inflation. So these people and these builders are building giant luxury tower block apartments, as you say, selling them off plan to investors
Yes.
who buy, sell them, trade them. All that happens. Now, by making a threat or a comment to suggest that you would be looking to seize those or take those back or compulsory purchase, however the legal process by which he takes it, I'm not here to debate that, does it not send a message to the construction firms to say, look, no longer is it a safe investment and a smart move for you to build portfolios of property that are exclusively for the sale to and the trading of offshore millionaires? It is now much more in your interest to build affordable housing.
Yeah, but that
because the council will buy it.
I think we're on the same page, but that makes it a gesture rather than a policy.
Well, he makes it a policy, and then that policy then informs the decisions of businesses.
Well, I'll just put some
preface policy.
I'll just put some people in my properties then.
Okay, perfect. Well, now you're no longer keeping it purposefully vacant.
But they're going to be my staff. It's going to be my butler. He's currently got a granny flat at the bottom of the garden, but that counts as part of my property here, so that wouldn't count as empty. I'll put him in the flat in Belgravia.
Okay, cool. So now he's in your property and you've got to charge him a rent. Now, you could charge him a low rent for tax purposes, or you could charge him an actual rent. It's a secondary form of income. You're going to have to pay tax on that now. It's no longer purposefully kept vacant. You're now contributing because you've placed someone into that property, regardless of what little play around loophole you want to fulfill.
Yeah.
Funds are going to change hands. One less person is going to be needing a house. Whether that's the granny flat, that's probably an extreme example, but I understand sort of the point you're making there.
Yes.
If you place someone in that property, it's no longer being kept purposefully vacant, which is the issue that you're trying to tackle.
You're right, and it couldn't possibly make the current situation worse. Even if there is industrial scale wiggling, there would be enough good coming of it to justify the whole practice.
I would think so. I mean, short of the entire property market collapsing in London or in the big cities, whereby these middle classes who have been screwed out of their...
Mate, I think you're right. I think you're right. I am looking at possibly the wrong end of the telescope. So although all of my little quibbles and caveats are credible, your point is bigger than mine, which is, yeah, all right, but if there really are 8,000 properties in this category, then even if 7,999 of them, which is profoundly implausible, employ the kind of dodgy tactics I'm describing, it would still be 7,999 households living in properties that are currently completely empty.
Absolutely, that would be my point. Now,
I think you're right, mate. I think
you're a bit reductionist when you.
Hang on. I'm just warming up my humble pie. All right, just give me a chance to get the plate ready. I think you've done me there completely.
Okay, well, it's one of the reasons I do like listening to you, James, is you are very open to, another point of view. But,
I like to be. I kind of want homelessness and the housing issues to be solved, and this argument that you just put people in them to avoid having them taken away from you, although it's true, is actually still positive rather than a negative.
Absolutely, that would be the point I would make, yeah.
I'm with you. Problems then become, what would I have to do? Would I have to just put it up for rent? Or would I have to have people in it? Because theoretically, a lot of the empty properties, there's a piece in The Guardian on Friday about how many of these new glossy high-rises are ghost towers. I'll retweet the article, actually, from the @Mr. James O'Bee account, because I read it with a sense of shock and horror. You would need to have measures in place to make sure that the idea was as meaningful as possible. But the fact that you need measures in place to make it meaningful does not undermine its usefulness as a policy.
No, and I do agree you would need a control mechanism in place. Now, I'm sure you've watched the television show The Thick of It. There's actually a very similar sort of narrative in that, where the minister is advertising his property for sale but not accepting offers on it.
That's it, exactly.
Now, there are now, there's authorities that are in place to say whether something's being devalued. Obviously, that works off the back of HM Revenue and Customs to make sure you're not just, bequeathing assets by a different name. You can't sell someone a house for 10 quid without attracting attention from HMRC. They're going to want their share. So there would be control mechanisms.
What do you do for a living? Are you in property?
No, I'm not in property. I work in anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism financing.
Flipping heck. It's a boom time for you then.
I'm fairly well versed in the
Well, precisely because that is very relevant to this conversation, isn't it? Because a lot of this dirty money is put straight into the proper. I'm teaching you how to suck eggs, aren't I? What about the other bit of it, which you're less qualified to comment on, which is, professionally qualified. You're probably intellectually qualified to comment on everything. My fear that just giving keys to properties to homeless people actually ducks the issue of what causes homelessness.
Okay, I'd like to address it now. I get your image that you're putting out there, but I'm not personally envisaging Diane Abbott and Jeremy Corbyn in a blimp throwing keys at the homeless of London. I imagine they're going to be put through to authorities, through to charities, and they're going to manage that process. Now, again, you're going to be looking at the people with the very serious issues, so people that need medical care, people that need drug treatment, alcohol treatment, people who've been sexually abused, that kind of thing. These people are already in programs, but the problem is that those programs have nowhere to house them that is considered safe.
Right, they can keep an eye on them and properly protect them. So you bring it. So you are looking at a revivification of the welfare state, aren't you? Did you just say holistic change?
I did, yeah.
Yes.
But I think you would probably argue that is essentially the platform upon which Corbyn presents his politics. It is a holistic change.
I'm nearly there, mate. I'm nearly there, and talking to people like you really helps me. It really does, because, fast forward or rewind the clock half an hour, and you have someone who likes to think of himself as essentially being a Christian liberal, arguing that a man who's said he's going to try to tackle social injustice and homelessness is pie in the sky. Luckily, people like Phil are here to keep me on the straight and narrow. You, though, of course, are now more than welcome to kick me back into touch again and send that pendulum swinging in the opposite direction. You know the numbers. James Corbyn, I don't know if that's a coincidence or a gag, writes, earlier you slated a caller for speaking untruths regarding Brexit. I now hear you implying to the public, the big difference between stating and implying, pal, but I appreciate that makes me sound a bit pedantic, that Labour policy is to hand keys over to the homeless. Please watch the Marr interview with Corbyn rather than reading the tabloid headlines, brackets I assume. Fair play, actually, hands up, but this is what he said, and I have seen it. Immediately purchase 8,000 properties across the country to give immediate housing to those people that are currently homeless. It is probably fair to say that my typifying that as just handing the keys over to somebody currently sleeping in a doorway was a little bit lazy. So mea culpa. And Phil in Gibraltar, whoa, took me to school. Absolutely took me to school. So what's not to like about this policy of Jeremy Corbyn's? Detail, of course. The devil is always in the detail. But in principle, 8,000 currently empty properties taken into public ownership and then thus turned into council housing. Local authorities required to build far more. There's a bit of a myth abroad that they can't do more than they're currently doing. You need to put a requirement in place, not a freedom, and give them the power to take over deliberately kept vacant properties, which, as Phil in Gibraltar just expertly explained, that might just mean that they put it up for rent on the open market, in which case, what are you complaining about? The housing crisis is caused largely by empty, existing properties. But, of course, political landscape in Britain being what it is, it's been a lot more helpful to people in the public eye to claim that it's actually caused by immigrants or too many people. It's houses left empty. Is anyone going to ring me and say, I've got loads and loads of empty houses and Corbyn can clear off? Because although you'll take that view into the ballot box, you might be a little shy of sharing it in public. 12:06 is the time. Andrew is in Kilburn. Andrew, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Jeremy Corbyn, he obviously hasn't got a clue what he's talking about. You cannot just take a property and give it to someone. It has to be of a certain standard, electrically, gas.
No, that's a given. I think you've fallen into the trap I've fallen into. We've all gone a little bit one-dimensional. They did it. Attlee did it after the war, didn't he?
Well, I do this for a living. The standards that I have to meet.
I do this for a living.
Yeah, but it can cost thousands just to get a property.
But you're presuming that the properties that are currently being deliberately left empty by very wealthy investors would be uninhabitable. I suspect the reality is the opposite, isn't it?
Well, quite possibly, but the people that you want to put into these properties couldn't afford those properties in Berkeley Square. Or
but there's two different constituencies here. There is the power given to local authorities to take over deliberately kept vacant properties, and then there is the 8,000 properties across the country that they would just buy on the open market. So they wouldn't be buying those in Belgravia and Knightsbridge and elsewhere. They're just trying to reinflate the social housing sector, which I would file under what's not to like, Andrew, to be honest.
They are currently buying property throughout the country to try and replenish their housing stocks, although it's not a widely known fact, but it is happening.
Well, the numbers usually show there's a legal requirement to replace something that's been lost in a property development, but you can write a cheque to cover that, as we saw in Kensington and Chelsea, and there hasn't been a policy or a programme of like-for-like replacement. You often get one property when two have been sold.
Well, the reason for that, the reason behind that would be that they're trying to move people from those areas into cheaper places to live, and I know people have got a right to live where they were born.
But this isn't that, is it? That could be filed under social cleansing. But this is people who currently don't have anywhere to live, being provided with property, a rented property.
Let's imagine, James, you've got a property somewhere.
Yes.
The council sees it from you. What happens when there's a leak? Who's going to pay for that repair? Who's going to pay for the insurance? Or when somebody falls down the stairs because they tripped on a loose piece of carpet? Have you got to pay for that? Because the council has seized your property?
No, but you can't. No. I mean, if it's been seized, which no one's really talking about except in the context of the deliberately left empty properties, but I thought Phil shot that fox by simply saying, well, you wouldn't leave it empty, would you, if you were running a risk of having it seized?
Well, no, of course you wouldn't.
Well, so that's that one dealt with, and then the other one is the 8,000 properties they purchased, which would be running exactly the same way as social housing is run now. So the responsibility for most of the things you described rests with the landlord.
Well, social housing is run by associations in the main.
And they are responsible for replacing boilers and doing the repairs that you just described. I don't know what you're worried about.
Well, it isn't. They're not responsible for it. It's down to the landlord, and that's thousands.
And the landlord is the social housing association. You just said that yourself.
Not if I own it. But not if I own it. If I own it, I'm the landlord.
Well, exactly.
Unless you come to an arrangement with me to.
I know all this. I don't understand what you think you're saying.
Well, you just can't do it.
Why not?
You cannot just seize people's houses. Because you would find...
They're not going to seize people's houses. That was what Phil in Gibraltar dealt with. I was where you were 20 minutes ago. You need a bit of the Gibraltar magic, mate. They're not going to seize people's houses because nobody's going to be daft enough to leave it deliberately empty after the Prime Minister has announced that would be forfeit.
But why is this man spending so much of his time talking about something of which he knows nothing? He must have advisors. What a nonsense statement to make.
But we've just established that it isn't. I may have presented it in a nonsensical fashion, but that's my bad.
Well, you would not allow your property to be taken over, nor would anybody else.
Which means that it is it's being rented on the open market. So it's removed somebody from the housing stress situation he described.
No, it won't. It just doesn't.
Well, now we've gone Brexit. Now you're just saying no, even though we've dealt with every point you've raised.
No. Well, people that rely on social housing, and this is a fact, people that are in social housing remain in social housing for the rest of their life. And 90% of those people do not gravitate to the private rented market. So? And that's the problem.
Why is that a problem?
Well, because there isn't enough social housing.
Well, he's just said he's going to build and buy more.
Yeah, he said that a long time ago. Everyone said that, but they don't.
Right, so the reason why you don't like this policy is because you think it will work, but you don't think he's going to deliver it.
No, it won't work. It won't work.
But you just said that social housing, we need a lot more of it, and the policy is to provide a lot more of it.
But the policy has always been to provide more of it.
And now we're back to you saying it would work, but I don't believe it.
Well, exactly.
But you just said that wasn't what you were doing.
Well,
I told you I do this for a living, Andrew.
You do this for a living, and you're very good at it, James.
But no, because I was wrong. I was wrong 10 minutes ago. Phil pointed it out. Hands up, mea culpa, job done. I think Corbyn is in the business of delivering wonderful dreams and ideas, which is why we're digging down into the detail, and the detail has delivered two facts. First, nobody in their right mind would leave it deliberately empty if you ran the risk of forfeiting it as a result of that, so we've dealt with that. Two, purchasing 8,000 properties across the country. I've thought this all along. Why don't they just buy houses, and then the people paying the rent to live in the house would be paying off the debt that was accrued by buying the properties? Instead of doing it for amateur investors in the buy-to-let market, do it on a national level. You're just worried you're going to take a hit in the pocket.
No, not
Yes,
at all. I've
yes.
got a contract, so I'm fine.
Well, for now. For now, Andrew.
For
Under
now.
Corbyn's glorious rule, your contracts will be worthless.
Yes, probably.
We shall
James,
see. Well, there you go.
pleasure.
Always, mate, always. You know what we're moving towards now, don't you? We're moving towards a what's not to like about this proposal, which I can't quite believe. That's in the space of less than 45 minutes. We appear to have undertaken the mother of all reverse ferrets. Still can't get on board, though. I don't know why. I'm just getting weird. Jeff's in Watford. Jeff, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome. You nearly added eventually then, didn't you?
Sorry, a bit nervous.
That's all right. It's only me.
I like your show, and I'm sort of on board with most of what you say. But I've got to admit, I was really upset by what you said earlier about if you get given the keys to a home, that it wouldn't work. I was a high rate taxpayer with a successful business, happily married, and I'm not the only one to tell this kind of story, by the way. There are many of us. My business went bust. My creditors took everything.
Yes.
My wife passed away from cancer.
Oh, mate.
And just through a series of events, I ended up homeless. Most of that time, over 18 months, was in hostels, but some of it was on the street. It was about a week when me and my friends used to sleep by air conditioning units because they blew out warm air.
Yes.
By a block of flats which had lots of vacant properties in it, and so you can imagine how we felt. What I'm trying to say is that when I eventually was given some social housing, how do you think I looked after that flat?
Yeah. I said I was being an idiot, didn't I?
I mean, I've spent my own money. I used to have my own.
I know.
everything.
Well, you know what I did, Jeff, and I'm sorry for doing this, but because we're near Charing Cross down here in Leicester Square, and you see the people spaced out on. I'm going to sound like Alan Partridge now, but in for a penny, in for a pound. You see the people spaced out on spice. You really do. And you see the people with chaotic lives, and you see the people who really struggle to look after themselves, and you say something, if you're not thinking straight, you say something a little bit narrow and shallow and callous.
I would say, Jeff, that you
You're Jeff, I'm Jim.
I would say, sorry, a bit nervous.
Don't be. You played a blinder.
That you're making a common mistake.
I agree with you.
I know about 100 people that are still homeless.
Yes.
And none of them have got an alcohol or a drug dependency problem.
No, I'm sorry.
They're all just ones.
I'm sorry.
They were all just one paycheck away from losing their home.
And how many times have you heard me say that? How many times have you heard me ask, how many paychecks have you got before the wheels come off?
This is going to become a massive issue because when the personal debt bubble bursts and people can't rely on their credit cards, which most of them that I know do,
yes,
I reckon there's going to be an escalation in homelessness, and we have to prepare now for housing those, what I would call decent, responsible people. All I needed was a base and a platform. I've now started a new business. I've got a new partner, and I just had to have, and I was just given that break. And if what Jeremy Corbyn said, there's some, I don't care what it's like, a rabbit hutch, whatever, and he says there's an empty property here that's just generating income. If you go into this under the local authority, not on your own, obviously with their support, just like social housing, I would have just taken their arm off, and so would all my friends.
Who were homeless at the time.
Who still are homeless. And they're not drug dependent, they're not alcohol dependent.
How many of them are working?
Emotional. Most of them are working, but they're working hand to mouth.
I bet you're getting emotional. This is a national shame. It's an absolute shame.
There's someone that I slept next to in our sleeping bags and so on, that was working in a I can't name the company, but was working in a coffee shop.
While sleeping rough.
While sleeping rough. And his biggest problem was how to get himself clean in order to go to work, in order to pay, because he wouldn't take handouts or anything. He had that, as I did. I
would probably be like that as well. Will you forgive me?
My male ego and pride wouldn't allow me to do that.
It's not ego and pride. Well, you can call it that. You can call it dignity, but then you're offending people who do take charity. There
aren't many who are just takers.
No, I hear you, mate.
Choose to be homeless.
No, I know. I'm so sorry. I don't know how I fell into that.
As well, I really felt from. I sat in my flat. I've emulsioned it and made it nice.
Yes.
But I I have to go to the people that I know and give them a bowl of soup, because I can't live there now feeling like all warm and comfortable. But you have to go on the journey in order to understand.
Well, let me ask you briefly about that. First of all, you don't have to, but would you accept my apology for that very lazy stereotyping?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. I don't think you meant it personally.
No, I didn't, I didn't really think it through, and that is the polar opposite of what I try to do every day, and that was a big mistake on my part, and I'm really sorry. And anyone else who's been on the journey that Jeff has been on, I apologise to you and your loved ones as well. Can I ask you a cheeky question before you go?
Yeah.
How did you vote 10 years ago?
Conservative.
And next time?
Oh, definitely. I'm going to vote for the man that might not be perfect, but is just giving a message of hope.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for being gentle with me. You would have been within your rights to give me a slightly more a robust kicking. This from someone who rather grandly dubs themselves Think Broadly on Twitter. I like that. Callers like Jeff are why I listen to Mr. James O.B. on a regular basis, despite holding a busy full-time job. Where else to hear stories like these? At LBC. Jeff, if you missed it, sorted me out. It's probably the best way to put it, because I've fallen into this trap, and I felt it recently, because there's such an uptick in homelessness near the office, near the studio, and trying to frame thoughts about a broad and complicated problem that are simple and uncomplicated is the polar opposite of what I try to do every day. So just sort of loosely categorising all homeless people as being chaotic and incapable of caring for themselves was such a... I know it's only a radio show, and I know we move on, and I know that plenty of other people who have the privilege of sitting behind a microphone every day lie to you constantly and demonise and alienate and describe others in the most negative and unfair of terms. But we want to be different, so you've got to say sorry when you get it wrong. I don't know where that came from, to be honest with you. So thank you, Jeff, for pulling me up. Jeff ended up homeless through a convocation of circumstances that I truly believe could happen to any one of us. So quite how I ended up falling into that lazy, knee-jerk trap, I just don't know. And I've been meaning to do this. I've been meaning to do it. So even in my mind, I've been thinking we need to talk about how easy it is to fall off the merry-go-round. We need to talk about that one paycheck away from oblivion. We need to talk to people like Jeff, because this stupid stereotype I've got of somebody off their face on spice, utterly incapable of... And this presumption you have that if you've ended up on the street, there must have been a point in your life where you decided to buy a bottle of whiskey instead of paying your rent. It's quite chilling, actually, to recognise how easily these thoughts can take hold of decent people.